Hello, today we're going to be programming the MR2312 LED series fire alarm panel utilizing the CFG 300 programming tool. I've already plugged in the programming tool and mounted it to the bottom of the top of the back box. In order to enter in the menu for a two-stage system, you'll have to select the lamp test and the alarm, supervisory trouble, building audible silence buttons together simultaneously. With this being a single stage system, I simply just have to hit the menu button. You'll now have to enter in a passcode to get to the menu options. The default passcode is 1111. A passcode can be 4 digits long with a maximum of 10 digits, and they must be numerical values. Once you've entered in your passcode, select Enter to enter into the command menu options. The first line will show command menu and the second line will scroll through the different selections. The different selections are panel config, config info, set time, set password, view event log, clear event log, walk test, I3 loop test, dialer config, test dialer, and exit. In order to enter in through any of the options 1 through 9, we'll need to first set JW5 and short out the 2 pins. When shorting out the 2 pins, you'll get an audible trouble that you've now entered in the config mode. You can silence that trouble by hitting the Alarm Supervisory Trouble Building Audible Silence button. From here, we can go into Panel Config by pressing Enter. When entering into the panel config, an audible trouble will sound. Simply just silence it. We now have the panel config being displayed on line 1 and the selectable options on the second row. By utilizing the up or down cursors, we can scroll through those options. The options are Features, Input Zone, I3 Zone, Output Zone, Correlations, Input Zone Label, Output Zone Label, and Default Config. On Features, if we would like to enter it, select Enter when it's visible on the screen. Now entered into the Features Config area. Option 1 is Manual Signal Silence. When in on the Manual Signal Silence option, if we press Enter, we have the option to leave it enabled as default, or by pressing down and hitting the left or right cursor arrow and applying the X, we can also disable it. By pressing up, we can now see that it is no longer enabled. By pressing cancel, it'll exit back out to the previous screen. The next option we have is fire drill. By selecting enter, we'll go into be able to manipulate fire drill. By default, it is enabled. By hitting the down cursor and then hitting the left or right arrow, we can apply an X to disable fire test if we choose to do so. By pressing cancel, again exits back out to the previous screen. Our next option is output circuit correlations. If we press enter, we'll go into those options. By default, it is disabled. We can press the up arrow and then the left or right cursor arrow to enable it if we choose to do so. If we need it enabled, we'd select enter, and then by pressing cancel, we'll back out to the previous menu option. Our next option under Feature Config is Water Flow Sprinkler Retard Timer. By pressing Enter, we'll enter into its options. By default, it has been selected as disabled. If we press the up cursor arrow and then the left or right cursor arrow, we can then enable our Water Flow Sprinkler Retard Timer. Press Enter if the enable selection is what you choose, and then cancel to exit back out to the previous menu screen. Our next Feature Config option is Aux Disconnect Programming. By pressing Enter, we enter into its options. By default, it has been enabled. If we'd like to change that, we'd hit the down cursor arrow and then the left or right cursor arrow to apply the X. We can then press Cancel to exit back out to the Feature Config options. The next option in Feature Config is Signal Silence Inhibit Timer. By selecting Enter, we'll enter into its options. By default, it has been disabled. By hitting the down cursor, we can see our other selectable options, which is 10-second inhibit, 20-second inhibit, 30-second inhibit, and a 1-minute inhibit. When we found the desired option that we want, we hit the left or right cursor to apply the X, select Enter, and then Cancel to exit back out to the previous menu options. Our next option is Auxiliary Disconnect, which disconnects the alarm relay and supervisory relays. When we enter into this, the options that we have is been disabled by default. By pressing the up cursor arrow and then the left or right cursors, we can enable the aux disconnect. By pressing Cancel, we exit back out to the previous menu screen. The next option in Feature Config is Auto Signal Silence Timer. By pressing Enter, we get to see the options for our Auto Signal Silence Timer. By default, Disable has been selected, but we can scroll through to find the other options. We have a 5-minute Auto Signal Silence Timer, 10-minute, 15, 20, and 30-minute options. When we find the desired time, we hit the left or right cursor arrows to apply the X, select Enter, and then Cancel to exit back out to the previous menu options. The next option for Feature Config is Remote Annunciators or Smart Relays. By pressing Enter, we get to see the options for the Remote Annunciators or Smart Relays. By default, none has been selected. We can hit the down cursor arrow to suggest that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 remote annunciators or smart relays. When we hit see the desired number of remote annunciators or smart relays, we hit the left or right cursor arrow to apply the X, hit Enter, and then exit by pressing Cancel. Back out to the previous menu options. The next option for Feature Config is Silence Alarm Transmit. By selecting Enter, we get to see its options. By default, it has been disabled. However, we can press the up cursor and then the left or right cursor to enable it if we desire so. We press Enter and then Cancel to exit back out to the previous menu options. The next option in Feature Config is our Power Fail Delay Timer. By pressing Enter, we get to see the options for the AC Power Fail Delay Timer. By default, none has been selected. By pressing the down cursor, we can scroll through some of the other options. We have 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours. If we see the desired duration, we can hit the left or right cursor arrow to apply the X, and then Enter and Cancel to go back out to the previous menu option. The next option under Feature Config is Common Supervisory Relay. By pressing Enter, we get to see the option for Common Supervisory Relay. By default, it has been selected as disabled. By hitting the up cursor and then the left or right, we can then enable the Common Supervisory Relay. And we'll press Enter and Cancel to exit back out to the previous menu options. The next option under Feature Config is Signal Isolators. By pressing Enter, we get to see the options for the signal isolators. By default, it has already been disabled. If we want to enable it, we'll simply hit the up cursor and then the left or right cursor to apply the X to enable. Now all we have to do is press Enter, and we can again then press Cancel to exit out to the previous menu screen. Option 14 for Feature and Config is Strobe Type. By selecting Enter on Strobe Type, we get to go through the options for it. By default, Normal has been selected. By pressing the down cursor, we can go through Gentex, System Sensor, Mircom, Faraday, Wheelock Cooper. When we found the desired strobe type, all we have to do is simply hit the left or right cursor arrows to apply the X, center, and then Cancel to exit back out to the previous menu option. The next option, option 15, is Signal Rate. By pressing Enter, we get to see the options for signal rate. By default, temporal has been selected. However, if we press the down cursor, we can find that we have the option for California. By pressing the up cursor, we can go back to temporal, then see March time, and then finally continuous. When we find the desired rate, all we have to do is hit the left or right cursor arrow to apply the X, press enter, and then again cancel to exit back out to the previous menu options. The next option in feature config is active end align resistor. By pressing enter, we get to see the options for it. By default, it has been disabled. However, if we press the up cursor, we can enable it by applying the X by hitting the left or right cursor arrows, if we choose to. By hitting cancel, we exit back out to the previous menu options. The next option for feature config is two-stage operation. By pressing enter, we get to enter into the options for two-stage. If we'd like to have the system act as a two-stage system, we'll hit the up cursor and enable the two-stage by applying the X using the left or right cursor arrows and selecting enter and then cancel to exit back out to the previous menu options. The next option under feature config is general alarm timer. By selecting enter, we go into the options for general alarm timer. By default, it's been disabled. The other options we have are 5 minute, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20, and 30 minutes. When you find the desired duration for your auto general alarm timer, you can hit the left or right cursor, apply the X, and hit enter and cancel to exit back out to the previous menu options. Our next option in feature config is common alarm relay operation. By selecting enter, we get to see the options it has been assigned. By default, it's currently set for both stages. That is when our common alarm relay will operate. By pressing the up arrow, we can select for when it only will operate when it enters in two-stage. For this option, please be aware of what type of system, two or single stage operation you've already implemented. By hitting cancel, go back out to the feature config options. Our last option under feature config is first stage LED. By default, it's been selected as disabled. If we want to enable our first stage LED, we'll hit the up cursor arrow and then the left or right cursor arrow to apply the X to enable. Again, if we hit cancel, we'll exit back out to the feature config options. By pressing cancel again, we'll exit back out to the panel config. By pressing the down cursor arrow, I can now enter into input zone by pressing enter. This input zone menu is used to program the process type for initiating circuits. The maximum number of initiating circuits is 12. Only those supported by the particular model are shown in the CFG300 configuration tool. The options we have, if we scroll through our initiating zones, will be the 12 zones we've spoke about. When we want to program a zone, we'll hit enter to enter in that zone. The options for a zone is by default selection is a non-verified alarm. The other options we have are verified alarm, sprinkler alarm, water flow alarm, non-latch supervisory, latch supervisory, general alarm, building, and trouble only. When you see the desired selection, you can hit the left or right cursor arrows to apply the X. And enter, and then cancel to go back out to the previous menu options. These same options can be applied through all zones 1 through 12. By hitting cancel, I go back out to the panel config options. By pressing down, I can see my next option, which is my I3 zones. By pressing enter, we can then go and enter into the I3 detection zones. By pressing the left or right cursors, we can apply the X to identify that there are R3 devices in that particular zone. And the zones will be 1 through 12. Again, we hit the left or right cursor arrow to indicate that there is an I3 device present in that zone. By hitting cancel, we exit back out to the previous menu options. Our next option under panel config is output zone. This menu is used to program the process types of indicating circuits. The maximum number of indicating circuits is 4. Only those supported by the particular model are shown in the CFG 300 configuration tool. By pressing enter, we can view the options for our indicating zones. Again, we'll have zones 1 through 4. If we select enter on one of these indicating zones, we can see the options for it. By default, the NAC 1 has been selected and all NACs have been selected for silenceable. However, if we press the down cursor, we can find that we can have it selected for non-silenceable, silenceable strobe, and non-silenceable strobe. When we find the desired option, we can hit the left or right cursor arrow to apply the X, and hit enter, and then cancel to exit back out to the previous menu option screen. The next option under panel config is correlations. By pressing enter, we'll enter into the correlation options. We'll see our zones 1 through 12. With any one of our zones, we can hit the enter button to select it, and then select what NAC circuits will operate when that zone activates. We can hit the left or right cursor arrows to unapply the X, so the NAC circuit will not turn on when the zone operates, or again, hit it to reapply. Once we're done with our selections, we can hit cancel to exit back out to the previous menu option, and then cancel a second time to go back out to our panel config options. The next option we have under panel config is input zone label. By pressing enter, we'll enter in and see our 12 initiating zones. By pressing the up or down cursor arrows, we can find the zone we choose to label. When we find the zone that we want to label, we'll hit enter and go into the label screen. From here, we'll have to hit the buttons to get the desired text. For example, if we wanted to call zone 7 fire, we'd have to hit the 3 button 4 times for the F, pound to move our cursor over to the right, hit 4 times for the I, pound to move our cursor again over to the right, 7 3 times for the R, hit pound to move the cursor over to the right, and then finally 3 times for the E. And again, our pound to move our cursor over to the right. Once the desired label has been added in, we can hit enter and cancel, and that zone will now be labeled fire. If we hit cancel again, we'll go back out to our panel config options. Our next option in panel config is output zone label. By pressing enter, we'll see our 4 indicating zones. By pressing the down cursor, we can scroll through our 4 indicating zones. If we choose to relabel one of these, we can hit enter, and we'll go into the label screen. Just like with our initiating circuits, we'll hit the options to get the desired text in, and then again, we'll hit cancel to go back out to the previous menu option. We can label all 4 indicating zones, and once we're happy with what we've selected, we can hit cancel again to go back out to the panel config options. Our last option in panel config is default configuration. Use this menu to load a default configuration into the panel. Warning: when you load a default configuration, the previous program configuration will be lost permanently. So please be aware whether or not you truly desire to default your panel's configuration. By selecting yes and hitting enter, anything that you have previously done as far as panel config will be reverted back to its default. By hitting cancel, we can go back out to the panel config options. By hitting cancel again, we'll back out through to the command menu. We'll need to silence the config access trouble, and then we can scroll down through our command menu options. Our next option under command menu is config information. By pressing enter, we'll be able to see our config information type. Currently, the panel is telling us that the configuration type was programmed through the front panel. It could also display factory default, means that the panel has not been configured and it is the same as it came from the factory. Serial port will indicate that it means the configuration was done from the computer through the serial port. And modem means that the configuration was done remotely through a modem. The next option in the command menu is set time. By selecting enter, we'll go into the options for set time. Again, a trouble may enunciate that you're in the programming utility. Silence it by pressing the audible silence. In time clock config, our first option is daylight savings. By pressing enter, we get the options for daylight savings. By default, it has been selected as disabled. If we would like to enable it, hit up on the menu option and then hit the left or right cursor arrow to apply the X. Next, we just have to press cancel to exit back out to the previous menu screen. The next option, if we hit down, is time clock. By pressing enter, we get to enter the options for time clock. We use this menu to set the time and date. Use the left to right cursor buttons to move the cursor to the desired location in the display, and use the up or down arrow buttons to increase or decrease the value. Press enter to accept the changes and cancel to ignore the changes. So if we needed to change the date, we could press the right cursor over to say Wednesday. We could turn it to Thursday, Friday, so on and so forth. Whenever we reach the desired date, all we have to do is press enter. Press cancel, go back out to the previous menu option. If we select down, our next option is compensation. By selecting enter, we get to see the options for compensation. Compensation value can range from -15 to +15 seconds. Use the up or down arrow buttons to select the daily compensation value and press enter. For a fast clock, adjust negatively. For a slow clock, adjust positively. For example, for a clock which runs 5 minutes a month, based on 30 days, fast, select -10 seconds. Again, we set the up or down cursor arrows to go into the positive or negative values. Once we've reached the desired value, we can hit cancel and it'll run back out to the previous menu option. That is all the options we have for time clock config. So if we press cancel again, we'll exit back out to the previous menu options. Again, we might get a config trouble. We can silence it by hitting the audible silence switch. Our next option here under command menus is set password. By pressing enter, we go into the new password selection. From here, we'll just need to enter in our new passcode. Again, there needs to be numerical values. And if we hit cancel, we're going to exit back out. If I hit enter with the passcode, new passcode, I can suggest it being the same as it was defaulted, 4 ones. I'll press enter. It's going to ask me to re-enter the new passcode. And just for an example, I'm entering in the old default again, 4 ones. Press enter. Now my passcode would have been changed. Our next option under the command menu is view event log. By pressing enter, we'll enter into the event logs list. The logs that we have to choose from are alarm log and general log. We select alarm log, all we will be viewing is alarm initiating situations. System startup and the alarm log cleared is all that's currently entered in on this panel's current alarm log. The other option we have in the event logs is general log. By selecting general log, we'll go into any of the events that have taken place on the panel itself. We can hit the up or down cursors to scroll through these events and ignore troubles. We also can hit the info button to see other information being presented in regards to that trouble if more information is available. By hitting cancel, we back out to the previous menu option, which is our event logs. By hitting cancel again, we'll go back out to our command menu. The next option in our command menu list is Clear Event Log. By selecting Clear Event Log, we get the options of clearing either our alarm log or our general log or all logs. By selecting all logs and hitting enter, you have the option to clear both logs. By pressing cancel, I'll back out of the operation and go back into the logs list. Now with the clear event logs, if I decide to choose just the alarm log or just the general log, by selecting one or the other and pressing enter, I get the same option. Do I want to clear this log? By hitting cancel, I back out of the option again. The next option in our command menu is walk test. Walk test allows the installer to verify initiating circuits wiring in the system. When walk test is selected, the following screen will appear. So if we select enter here, it will go in perform a walk test. If you select yes, it's going to ask or wants you to specify what zone will be entering into the walk test. By hitting the left or right cursor buttons, we can apply the X to the appropriate zone that will be going into walk test. If we want to remove it, again, hit the left or right cursor arrow to remove the X from the walk test zone area. Our next option in the command menu is I3 loop test. By selecting enter, we'll go in to perform a I3 loop test. The I3 maintenance test is designed to test the devices on I3 zone. An I3 maintenance test can be invoked for the command menu 6 minutes after power up or after pressing the reset. If an I3 maintenance test is selected, the screen will appear as such. Would we like to do the I3 loop test? Select enter. It will then go into the zones, our 12 zones that we have on the panel, and we can scroll through these zones until we find one of the zones that has the I3 device. From here we can press cancel and we'll back out again. Go back into my menu options, hitting my default passcode, enter, scroll down to our next command menu option, which happens to be our dialer config. By selecting enter, we can go into the dialer configuration options. Again, we may need to silence any troubles that may come in. After which is our exit. By selecting enter on option 11, we exit out of the menu options. And that is how we would use our CFG 300 LCD service tool for programming. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.